Hello, Professor Franz here. Welcome to the story of American steam locomotives. I hope our journey today will help you appreciate how locomotives and trains have been so profoundly intertwined in our American history and experience. This is easy to forget because we're not surrounded by trains as much today. So today we'll focus mainly on the steam locomotives, how they were invented, developed, including in the United States. In future lectures, we'll look at the sociological changes we went through with locomotives, and also the expansion of locomotives starting in the 1840s and 50s and after, and then also the Transcontinental Railroad. First, some background. In English peat bogs, archaeologists found some ancient wooden sidewalks from about 2000 BC. They were used for transporting carts of building materials or crops across swampy ground. A great idea. Near the Isthmus of Corinth in 600 BC, the Greeks constructed trackways to transport boats. Grooves in the limestone fit in the many wheels of the wagons. Imagine how many accidents preceded those grooves that kept the wagons on track. The ancient Romans constructed trackways, and China had rail wagons bring workers and materials to the China Wall. By the mid-1500s, wagonways in England and Germany were carrying heavy ore out of mines. They didn't even have to steer because of those tracks. In the first industrial revolution in England in the mid-1700s, iron plates reinforced the wooden tracks. And then by the 1760s, whole track systems could be made of iron. These railways were not moving people, but heavy goods in safe, quick, and energy-efficient ways. This railway system was crucial in fueling the first industrial revolution in the 1700s. In this age of innovation and mechanization, it was the crazy dream of a few to invent a machine to move those heavy carts to and from the mines and factories and to the city markets. Of course, they were not envisioning a train system moving people and freight all over the country. That would come later. But what energy could match or better these horses pictured here? The most promising energy for machinery then was steam heated from coal. The Roman thinker Hero in the 1st century A.D. experimented with steam power. He could make an orb spin around by the propulsion of steam, or blow air into musical pipes, or heat public baths, or open a temple door as though a god did it. But the steam engine had to wait another 1,600 years for inventors like Thomas Savery, who patented a steam-driven engine to pump water out of coal mines in 1698. His engine was modest and broke down a lot, and it was big and heavy, like our first computers that used to fill a room. Thomas Newcomen lived in Cornwall, England, where water flooded their tin mines below sea level. They were using a long line of buckets powered by horses turning a wheel. Newcomen developed a steam-driven pump in 1712 better than Savery's pump. The power was measured by how many horses were replaced, or horsepower. The Scottish engineer James Watt in the 1770s had a flash of insight while trying to fix someone's Newcomen pump, and not only greatly improved the steam engine, but he put a rocking beam with his engines so that the engine could turn a wheel or do many other applications. The steam engine was then applied to hundreds of applications and got better, smaller, and lighter, which was necessary for any steam-driven transportation because that engine would be on board. So a boat or a railway cart in motion to another location, or loco, or motion loco, or better, locomotion. By 1807, Robert Fulton developed a steamboat with the engine wheel turning paddles, and very quickly these filled the rivers of America and then the steamships in the ocean. The first steam locomotive was from the British engineer Richard Trevithick, who chugged down a track in Wales on Christmas Eve, 1801, 6 years before the steamboat. It lasted just 3 days, because while his team was celebrating over a roast goose meal, the puffing devil machine, its fire boiled away the water and it burned up. He made a circular track in London in 1808, challenging people to run and keep up with it, calling the engine "Catch Me Who Can." That was great and amusing, but about 13 years later, George Stephenson of England became the father of the modern railroad because from 1821 to 1830 he set up several railway routes between cities, and they were doing useful work moving stuff that usually was brought by horsepower. For that application, people got on board. Trevithick's little circle demonstration was like the ancient hero's temple doors opening by steam. Well, it was nice, but Stephenson showcased the locomotive meeting the great need of transporting heavy materials in that industrial age. But Stephenson's vision also included passengers from the public. Imagine yourself on a brisk fall day in England in 1825. You have the honor of joining about 600 others in a large open railway coach connected with 20 coal wagons. And you're told a single steam engine will pull all this weight for 8.5 miles, beyond what any large horse team could pull. We would not blame them if they were a little bit skeptical. And then locomotion number 1 huffed and puffed, and soon enough they actually began to move, and then build up speed. Now the journey, with occasional maintenance stops, took over 2 hours, but when they were moving, it averaged 8 miles an hour. You would not have complained at the short breakdowns. You would have stepped off absolutely amazed that you lived to see such a day. Stephenson's successful locomotive and his business model, moving both ore and people, were replicated all over the world. In the 1830s, locomotive lines with an expanding cargo of goods began to connect the major cities of Europe and the United States. Countries decided the track gauge, or the distance between the rails. If they feared a neighboring country, they chose a different gauge, so the enemy army could not just ride into their country. Stephenson's gauge was 4 foot 8.5 inches, and that's what most chose in the United States and Europe eventually. Today, about 3/5 of the world's railroads use this. The United States was quick to adopt the locomotive. Our road system was poor, though canal waterways were improving, like the Erie Canal in 1825. However, river travel wasn't always available, like in winter freezes, nor did canals reach every place. Atlantic ports like Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Charleston lacked canal access like New York City had for their markets. So it's no surprise that the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad launched in 1828. The B&O Railroad inaugurated their track on July 4, 1828, with the first spadeful of earth turned over by the last surviving signer of the Declaration of Independence, 91-year-old Charles Carroll. My, the changes he witnessed in his lifetime. Peter Cooper built a locomotive called Tom Thumb for B&O, and by 1830 he was doing test runs on a 13-mile track, reaching a whopping 18 miles an hour. But a local stagecoach company challenged them to a race in 1830. Well, it had to happen. The clash of the old and new. A man with a horse carriage soon had a half-a-mile lead, but the locomotive built up steam and passed him. However, Mr. Cooper wanted to finish even sooner, so he opened the safety valve for more power. but this caused the main engine belt to either break or come off, and they coasted to a halt. The happy horse and driver passed and won the race. However, in the big picture, which investors recognized, this was a win for the locomotive beyond a belt failing. There were others like the South Carolina Canal and Railroad in 1830 and the Mohawk and Hudson Railroad in 1831. Notice that these railroad cars look amazingly like stagecoaches. Well, they had to start somewhere. In 1847, this train transported over 229,000 people. People wanted to experience this historic invention. Wouldn't you? The Charleston and Hamburg Railroad in December 1830 featured the engine Best Friend of Charleston. But after a few months, one of the workers became annoyed at the steam escaping from a valve and put something over it and sat on it. Finally, peace and quiet, until the boiler exploded, killing the worker and scalding the main engineer driver. Upon these few successful railroad examples, the American railroad took off. Between 1840 and 1860, the United States went from 3,000 to 30,000 miles of track, mostly in the northern states. Soon we had more track miles than the rest of the world combined. Notice this growth from 1850 to 1870. Wow. When the Erie Railroad had to cross the Native American lands in upstate New York, the local tribe charged $10,000. The railroad manager complained that the land was not good for anything except growing a few crops. The chief replied, "It pretty good for railroad," and he was paid. With the expansion of American railroads, people could live and work in two cities and ride for pleasure or family connections. Notice in this illustration both passengers and cargo, and yes, a nice breeze for the passengers, though that breeze included all the soot and smoke from the coal-burning steam engine in front of them. It would take a few decades to improve the lot of locomotive passengers. So the railroad was significantly changing this nation in many ways, economically and socially. My, how people were amazed that they lived in such an advanced age. Next week, we'll take some time to consider how many Americans adjusted psychologically, sociologically to this amazing invention. Thanks. I'll see you then.